Mountains captivate, enchant, and steal people's hearts for millennia. Mountainous regions occupy 1/4 of the Earth's land surface. Mountain ecosystems play a crucial role in the planet's ecology, providing humanity with water, food, and energy, and serving as home to nearly 15% of the population. That is, over 1 billion people. Mountains submit to the strong, and sometimes the strong submit to the mountains. Experienced athletes prepare for ascents not just for one day, and they approach hikes seriously and thoughtfully, because this is far from safe and is costly, so every detail matters, from equipment to food supplies. In recent years, mountaineering has become very popular among thrill seekers, and the most interesting thing is that despite alpinists dying on summits time and again, people still conquer mountains year after year. The number of those wishing to conquer a cherished peak grows more and more, and most of them embark on dangerous journeys not to achieve some great goal, but to overcome their fears or test their strength, simply to place another flag on the world map and take a couple of cool photos for Instagram. This is a paradox. However, some risk their lives climbing mountains for pleasure, and then other rescuers, already as part of their job, risk their lives to save the first ones. But extremists climb not only mountains but also underground for pleasure. When I was preparing for this video and searching for information, my entire body literally cramped from a horrible feeling of claustrophobia, which in ordinary life I have never suffered from and do not suffer from. But for me personally, understanding people who risk climbing to the summit of Everest is much easier than those who engage in caving. There exists a science called speleology, which deals with comprehensive research of natural underground spaces, that is, caves, their origin and evolution, age, composition, migration of underground waters, practical application of these very caves, and much, much more. This is what scientists do, but there are also those who love to crawl into caves for sporting or educational purposes. This is what caving relates to. In fact, this activity is incredibly risky and dangerous. Complex routes due to the great variety of cave relief, high relative humidity at low temperatures, absence of natural lighting, and a high degree of autonomy during the expedition. Everything depends only on you and your team. People squeeze through narrow tunnels and dive into underground waters, essentially playing a deadly game, and often the cave world punishes such daredevils by leaving them in its territory. Caving is surely a very interesting hobby, but also terrifyingly dangerous. And so, USA, there is a hydrothermal cave Nutty Putty in the state of Utah. It was discovered in 1960, and since then it has become a favorite pilgrimage site for cavers, and later a site of a terrible tragedy after which the cave was closed permanently. The hydrothermal cave Nutty Putty, located west of Utah Lake in Utah, about 55 miles from Salt Lake City, was discovered by a ranch owner in the cave area who noticed warm steam coming out of a hole. To understand what was happening there, he turned to cave exploration enthusiast Dale Green. When Green and several of his friends first entered the cave, there were no signs that anyone had been there before, and according to him, they immediately realized they were in a unique place, all because of the clay. Everyone who passes through this cave comes out covered in clay, hence the name Nutty Putty, Nutty Putty. Since then, it has become one of the most popular caves in Utah, but its narrow passages also made it one of the most dangerous. The total length and depth are 413 and 45 meters, respectively. Many experienced cavers insist that the narrow entrance with even tighter and more winding passages of Nutty Putty Cave greatly complicates navigation inside the cave. Later, it became very popular. By some estimates, it was visited by over 5,000 people a year. Many cavers descended into the cave at night and did not take necessary safety measures. The main danger is slippery surfaces. Moreover, this problem became exacerbated because due to the movement of a large number of people, these surfaces were polished by friction, becoming smoother and more slippery. Especially dangerous is one of the most popular places in the cave, the so-called small descent, an underground cavity whose floor is inclined at a 45-degree angle. In 2006, a study of the consequences of such mass visitation of the cave began, and a proposal was made to significantly limit the number of visitors. Then, on May 24, 2006, gates were installed at the entrance to the caves, and it was temporarily closed to visitors. At that time, regulations for visitation and safety requirements were being developed, upon compliance with which cavers could be allowed to descend, and by May 18, 2009, the cave was reopened. 26-year-old John Edward Jones came to visit his relatives for Thanksgiving. At that time, John was studying to be a pediatric cardiologist, had recently become a father. His wife was pregnant with their second child. In November 2009, brothers John and Josh decided to revive their love for caves. Why revive? Because John had extensive caving experience, but not recently. Most expeditions in his life happened at a very young age. John's father often took him and his younger brother Josh on caving trips throughout Utah. From the age of 4, he spent much of his free time exploring caves. He was tall but thin, flexible, and seemingly immune to claustrophobia. As their next conquest, the family chose Nutty Putty Cave, and a few days before Thanksgiving, around 8 in the evening, they arrived at the site. Their group was quite large. They were joined by 9 more friends and acquaintances who finally entered the cave. Everything went smoothly for an hour. The group explored the largest cavity in the cave, the Big Descent. But soon after the start of the expedition, John, Josh, and 2 of their friends decided to take on a challenge they had heard about earlier. Namely, to pass through the birth canal, a narrow, dangerous, and incredibly complex passage through which cavers must crawl with particular caution. John went first. On the way to the birth canal, the group split several times, and John ended up alone when he discovered a narrow cave. He assumed this was the famous one. Due to intense curiosity, he made his way into the tunnel system, moving forward using all parts of his body. He continued to move slowly, but for some reason, the narrow passage did not end. Instead, the passage narrowed. An expansion where he could turn around did not appear. Further, the tunnel had a sharp descent downward. John, suspecting nothing, confidently moved forward, perhaps noticing that the tunnel below became wider. But as he exhaled all the air and advanced further and further into the narrow passage, he finally got stuck and realized he had made a serious mistake. Just about 15 meters in the wrong direction led to a tragic event. From conflicting sources on the internet, it is unclear whether John entered the birth canal and then turned the wrong way, or if he completely missed the birth canal and crawled into another passage located next to the birth canal, which is called the Ed's Push. Ed's Push does not lead to larger cavities. It leads nowhere, at least not where a man 185 centimeters tall and weighing 90 kilograms can fit. At the end of this section, there are 4 unexplored passages, but all are too small for a person, and John's childhood experience could not compare to this unexpected situation. In any case, John continued to move forward until he was completely stuck. Moreover, he slid into a crevice that went almost straight down, which did not allow him to turn back on his own. The narrow slit in which he found himself was 25 by 46 centimeters in size. This size is comparable to the opening of a washing machine, except that it is not a perfectly round hole. He had to try to move forward, but he couldn't do it because the space was too small even for John to breathe normally. Trapped at a depth of more than 30 meters underground and deep inside the cave, about 120 meters from the entrance, John could only wait and pray. His brother Josh was the first to realize the situation ahead, as he had been following him all this time. He could only see his legs sticking out of the narrow passage. Worried about how tightly John was squeezed between the walls and how vertically his body was positioned in the shaft, Josh tried to pull him out but only managed to lift him a little. As soon as he let go of John, he slid back into the crevice even further than he was initially. His headlamp shattered. One hand was pressed to his chest, and the other was pulled back. Now he couldn't move at all. His ankles and feet were free, but that didn't matter since gravity was pulling him down. Realizing that there was no time to waste, Josh hurried back to the exit as fast as he could. Once outside, he immediately called for help. The first person to arrive at the scene was Susie, a volunteer rescuer who immediately dropped everything after receiving a message on her rescue pager. She arrived around midnight. It had been more than 3 hours since John was trapped deep inside the cave. Small, agile, and quick, Susie immediately reached John. She encouraged him, saying not to worry and that they would get him out of there. Over the next few hours, dozens of rescuers arrived. More than 100 people worked on the operation. The rescue team quickly brainstormed plan after plan. The main danger was that the guy was stuck upside down, and here the main problem is related to the circulatory system. The human body is not designed for such a position. The body has to constantly pump blood out of the lungs and head, as our vessels are adapted to work in the natural body position. Therefore, prolonged stay in such a position becomes an extremely extreme test. The doctor warned his colleagues that they had only 8 to 10 hours to rescue him. They discussed everything, even lubricating the cave walls, until they decided to use a rescue rope that passed through a series of lifting cams. One end of the rope was tied to John's legs, and the other end was pulled by the team. At the same time, they also tried to drill pieces of rock next to John, but expanding the passage also failed. The too narrow space of the passage did not allow any equipment to be dragged except chisels and hammers, and the hard material and inconvenient position made drilling slow and painful for John. In more than an hour, they managed to drill only about 5 centimeters of rock. For several hours, volunteers built a system to finally pull the man to freedom, but they only managed to lift him slightly, and then John's legs hit the ceiling. Due to immobility and compression, this caused excruciating pain, and due to the bend of the tunnel, the rescuers could not bend his body. There was a risk of simply breaking his legs, which the guy simply would not survive. With their first system of lifting cams, they failed. Time was passing. The rescuers worked feverishly. Everything was complicated by how narrow the cave was. Despite a large team of rescuers, volunteers, emergency services, and a rescue helicopter outside, only one person could have direct access to John. Meanwhile, John was getting worse. He had been upside down for a long time. It was getting harder for him to breathe. His heart had to work twice as hard against gravity to push the continuous blood flow out of the brain. John oscillated between panic and calm, and there was nothing left but to give him an injection containing a sedative. The rescuers maintained dialogue with him all the time, and at some point they even started singing songs. Later, two-way cable radios were brought into the cave and managed to lower one to him so he could talk to his wife, who was at the cave entrance on the surface. Both were emotional and comforted each other. By that time, John had been trapped upside down for 19 hours. Everything changed when the rescuers tried to use a pulley system anchored deep into the cave walls. This system includes one or several pulley wheels and a rope and is used for easy and safe lifting or other movement of heavy objects. Finally, having set up the pulley systems, they began to pull John out. They worked in a team of 8 people, all these people as one. Sometimes John experienced severe pain, so they took frequent pauses, but each time they pulled, they managed to lift John. Having pulled him up the 3rd time, John was finally raised high enough that he could look into the eyes of the nearest rescuer to him. He looked tired. His eyes were red. His face was dirty, but otherwise he looked normal. The rescuer saw that although John complained, there was a smile on his face. After a short break, they decided to continue pulling John out. When the rescue team pulled John up the 4th time, something happened. All those pulling John suddenly fell backward, and the rope suddenly slackened in their hands. The nearest rescuer felt something hit him hard in the face and lost consciousness for a second. When he came to, he saw nothing but dust. When the dust settled a bit, he realized that the stone arch near John where the rope was tied had cracked, and the nearest key bolt had broken. He couldn't make out in the dust where exactly John was, but soon he understood. John had slid back into the crevice again, this time seemingly even deeper than before. Since the rescuer received serious facial injuries from the metal carabiner strike, he could not continue his rescue work. He had to switch places with his father, who was also in the rescue team. When he approached John, he realized that John's breathing was more shallow and less frequent, but he was trying his best to stay alive. The rescuer called John but received no response. In desperation, he tried to descend into the crevice to wrap the rope around John's waist. However, he got stuck himself. Having freed himself, he drilled a new hole for the pulley and climbed out of the cave. He was replaced by another rescuer who reached John but also could not contact him. Soon after that, a medical worker climbed into the cave. After 27 hours in an inverted position, John was finally pronounced dead from cardiac arrest and suffocation shortly before midnight on the evening of November 25, 2009. His family thanked the rescuers for all their efforts, even despite the tragic news. In total, 137 rescuers labored tirelessly for 27 hours to get John out, but they had to leave the tragedy site empty-handed and with heavy hearts. One of them told the media that this was his most difficult rescue in his 29 years as a search and rescue volunteer. The next day, authorities determined that retrieving John's body from the cave was too difficult and dangerous, and therefore Nutty Putty Cave would forever remain the place of John Edward Jones's final rest. Since then, the entrance to it has been filled with cement, and John's family installed a memorial plaque at the cave entrance in his memory. John's body remained there along with his dreams and plans for life. Although Nutty Putty attracted thousands of visitors from around the world, John Jones became the only victim. But did Nutty Putty have a dark past like most major incidents? Something similar in these places, but not as tragic, had already happened. Another notable incident occurred in the cave in 2004 before John's death. At that time, 2 Boy Scouts nearly died or close to the same place where John later died. Both Boy Scouts got trapped a week apart, and it took rescuers more than 14 hours to rescue one of the Boy Scouts. And in all that time, 4 cavers stuck in the narrow bends and turns were rescued from the cave. Thank you very much for watching this video. Write in the comments what you think about dangerous sports, in particular about caving. Did you feel claustrophobia while watching this video? Could you in principle take such a rather dangerous step, a risky adventure? And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so as not to miss new releases, and subscribe to the Instagram and Telegram channel so as not to get lost. See you in the next video on the channel, and no one will know. Bye-bye.